It's mid-September and time for episode 13 of our Dahlia diary. Since the last episode we've had our charity open weekend. We're going to show you some film clips that we made that weekend, as well as some film of when we visited the UK Dahlia trials in Golden Acre Park, Leeds. Then, exciting times, Geoff is going to give you his sermon on how he cross-pollinates his own dahlias and takes seed from them. That should be a laugh, because he's only produced a few new varieties of his own, and most of them were rubbish. Do your best to stay awake.
It's Friday the 3rd of September, the day before we open our garden for the National Garden Scheme charities. The garden's looking good, it's just a question of keeping on top of the deadheading. And also I'm going to have to do some watering, so I've got the hosepipe out. It's not rained for a fortnight, so everything's pretty dry, and so I want to make sure the flowers are looking at the best, so tonight I'll go around and water everything. Now here are a few clips from the open weekend. We got about 400 visitors over the 2 days. Quite a lot of them said that they'd seen our YouTube videos and wanted to come and take a look at the garden in the flesh. Thank you for coming, everybody. As you can see, as well as looking around the garden, people enjoyed a nice cup of coffee and a piece of cake that was provided to us by the local Women's Institute. All in all, a very successful weekend. It's Monday the 6th of September, the day that after we opened for the National Garden Scheme charities. The garden's still looking pretty good, but the lawn took quite a battering. It'll recover though. But today is a special day for me. We're going on our annual expedition to Golden Acre Park in Leeds. That's where the UK National Dahlia Society hold trials of new varieties of dahlias to see whether they are suitable for use in exhibition. Many of the top UK growers send their dahlias there to the trials. Obviously they want to win the first prize, but they want to know whether their dahlias are good enough. Because of COVID, the trials got cancelled in 2020, so I'm guessing that there should be a lot more good varieties this year because people will have doubled up and sent extra. So here we are arriving at the park. We took Heather's dad with us for a day out. It's a beautiful park. They've got a lovely, their own floral displays made by Leeds City Council, I believe. I love this blue-red colour combination. Note for the future, try that one in my home. Even the toilets are beautifully decorated too. So here we are at the trial gardens, and this is a list of all the previous winners. I'm going to talk about some of the varieties that caught my eye, but if you want to see all of them, there's a separate video called Geoff and Heather Visit UK Dahlia Trials. Down and Peggy, I love the colour of this one, but as a garden flower it flowers too far below the foliage for my liking. This one's called Kojak. You'd expect it to be bold, wouldn't you? I love this contrasting pinks and the dark purpley side colour in the middle. Eastwood Jane. I want to look at my own raisings of cactuses compared with this. I'm afraid mine aren't going to win any prizes, are they? I'd love to have this one in my garden, Gillian. Or as Heather says, it could be Gillian. Roger's Choice. It's a sport off this one called Cheval Megan, the one that I actually grow in my own garden. It's been a good dahlia for me this year as Cheval Megan, so I think there's a fair bet that Roger's Choice would do the same job for me. Bit like Jamander, I suppose, though. This is an American one called Clearview Dorothy. Lovely flower, but it's a very short plant. Tracy Diane, presumably a sport off of either Winome Diane or Ruskin Diane. Lovely flower, but the blooms are a bit late for me. Jake's Choice. I like the pink centre. I can't deny that for a garden, these Hadrian's bubblegums and these Hadrian's summer wine would make a lovely garden display. Heather says I've got to get some of these. Now this one's called John's Kiwi. Apparently it's a sport of trelling kiwi. Trelling kiwi wins loads and loads of prizes. Now if this is distinctly different from the trelling kiwi, then I think this one's got a very good chance of winning this competition. It is a real beauty, beautifully fine petals. Well, I have to say that my predictions come true, that they are a very good bunch of varieties this year. Normally you get 50%, which are obviously not up to the mark, but the most of these are quite clearly very good varieties, and some will definitely be prize winners of the future. It's not just the National Dahlia Society that trials its plants here. In the park they also have trials of plants that are suitable for hanging baskets. I think this is a sort of verbena. I like it. We're looking for a new tree to replace a dead lilac. Saw this one in Golden Acre Park and thought, what a lovely tree. If anybody knows what it's called, could you let me know? This beauty is called Kenora Makeup B. When Gordon LaRue, who produced all the Kenora varieties, was in hospital suffering from cancer, he was given a chemotherapy drug called Makeup B. It saved his life, and so he named a dahlia after it. And this is how the pot tubers are getting on at the moment. They're about 3 feet tall now, perhaps a little bit more, some of them. They're very easy, you don't have to do very much at all with them. Keep them watered and that's about it really. But you do need to stop them flowering. Otherwise they will be putting their energies into developing the flower instead of developing a tuber. Well, now the open weekend's gone and we're having no more visitors, and the hot weather seems to have gone, so I'm no longer having to spend all my days watering. And then the subsequent floods that never actually materialised are off the menu. I think I've now got time to start talking to you about growing dahlias from seed, creating my own varieties. Now let me say at the outset, I am by no means an expert on producing new dahlias from seed. I've read a lot about the theory, but I've not had a great deal of practical experience. The reason for that is that to be successful you really need to start quite early in the growing season. You've got a lot better chance of producing successful seed early in the season when the weather's warmer, drier and less windy. Because we've been opening our garden for charity during the first weekend in September for the last 13 or 14 years, I've never been able to start the seed producing process until after that. Because to do it, you need to expose the pollen to the bees. And to do that, you've got to take off all the petals off the flowers. That wouldn't look very nice when people are paying to come and look in the garden. So I've only been quite successful one year when we had a very dry autumn. That year I managed to get about 100 seeds that actually germinated. So let's start with the basic mechanics of seed production. I would like to cross this lovely yellow Winholm Diane with this pink mini decorative called Hillcrest Divine. Similar shape and size, so it should provide a good match. The first thing that I need to do is to expose the pollen, and to do that I need to find a flower that's past its best and remove all the petals. If you were to leave petals, the danger is that the rain would get them all wet and cause the seed head to rot. So that's Winholm Down complete. The next job is to find a suitable flower on Hillcrest Divine and remove the petals from that one. Once you've exposed the pollen on the two plants that you want to cross, you've got choices to make. You need to get the pollen from one flower to the other flower. The first way is to use a brush. You brush the pollen off one flower onto your brush and take it all over to the other flower and brush it on. Having brushed the pollen from flower A to flower B, you're going to find that you've got some pollen from flower B, which you can then transfer straight back to flower A. Alternative to using a brush is to cut off one of the flowers and take it over to the other flower that you want to fertilise. Then just rub the two heads together so that pollen transfers from one flower to the other. That's a good and easy way to do it, but bear in mind that if you've only got a few flowers to work with, you're actually cutting off 50% of the flowers that you could use for producing seed. Whichever way you choose, you need to remember this. Pollen is only viable for a relatively short time. Just because you can see a yellow bit at the top of the flower doesn't necessarily mean that that pollen is ready for use at the moment. So if you use the brush, you need to keep going back to the two flowers and using the brush for at least 2 or 3 days to be sure of making the proper cross. Whereas if your preferred method is to rub two flower heads together, then you need to put one of the flower heads into water, keep it there for 2 or 3 days and keep using it again and again over the same flower. Sometime during that 2 or 3 cycle, the pollen will be just right. Having done all that hard work to try to cross two specific varieties, the last thing you want to happen is for a bee to come along with pollen from another flower. So you need to find some sort of a barrier to stop the bees getting on there. My old mate Ken Stock used to cut the bottoms off his wife's old tights and use those to put over the top of the flower. But I've found that an upturned plastic tumbler does the job just as well, so long as it's light enough so that it doesn't bend the stem. At this time of the year, I get into a constant battle with the local fox, who likes to dig up looking for worms everywhere. And the trouble is, sometimes it digs right at the bottom of the dahlia plants. So every morning I have to go around and put back the soil so that the tubers aren't exposed. To try to deter the fox, I have a radio that I leave on all night on a talk programme. I've forgotten to turn it on for the last few nights, so I think I better turn it on tonight to try to keep that fox away again. I'm now going to talk about nature's own way of doing the pollination. You can leave the job up to nature's pollinators, i.e. the bees, the moths, the butterflies, etc. But before I do that, I think I ought to talk a little bit about plant genetics. You see, most flowers only have a pair of chromosomes. For example, Lavatera. If I manage to get a cross between this dark flower in one and this lighter flower in one, all the seeds would produce a flower that looks very similar. There might be slight differences in shades between them, but they would all definitely look like a Lavatera. Dahlias, on the other hand, are far more complex. They've actually got 8 pairs of chromosomes, so there's far more variation. That explains why dahlias have a far wider range of colours than Lavatera, why they come in different heights, why they come in different shapes, why the flowers are of different size. If you were to cross Dahlia A with Dahlia B, none of the seeds will produce a flower that looks exactly like either A or B. If you were to cross 2 miniature decoratives, they might have flowers that look like miniature decoratives, but some of them would have a lot more petals than others, and there would be difference in colours between the different flowers. So trying to cross dahlias is actually a very haphazard process, and introducing bees into the process makes it even more haphazard, because you've no idea where that bee has been prior to getting onto the flower that you want to produce seed from. Ultimately, leaving it to the bees means that you're no longer in control of the fertilisation process. All you can do is to do your best to reduce the odds on producing a decent flower. Now if you're hoping to produce a semi-double flower like this one with an open centre, you've got a good chance, because a fair proportion of seedlings end up open centred like this one. I always put them on the compost heap because that's not what I want. In order to reduce the chances of getting an open centred seedling, what to do is take away all other open centred dahlias. That is to say, try to reduce the chances of that bee that you're relying on to do the fertilising for you having been to an open centred dahlia before it gets to your flower. Let's say that you're trying to create a medium-sized cactus dahlia with a fully double centre. To do that, you'll have a lot better chance if you try to take the seed from another fully double medium cactus. And if a bee visits your flower, it's best if it's just visited another medium cactus prior to visiting your flower, so that on its legs it's already carrying pollen from another medium cactus. Well, in our front garden there just happens to be a patch of semi-cactus dahlias all next to each other. So I'm going to use that area as an experiment. As each flower on those dahlias gets past its best, I'm going to remove the petals. Now, unlike when I'm trying to create dahlias using hand pollination, I'm not going to remove every last petal, because I've found that bees are more likely to go to a flower that's got a few petals left on it. The colours seem to attract them. Obviously, I'm hoping to get some semi-cactus seeds from these plants. Next year, I will plant them out and see what happens. In a way, I'm trying to create a bee highway through a semi-cactus forest. I think my yellow and blue combination at the front of the main bed looks rather nice, don't you? But I think my experiment to grow cosmos behind them's not really worked out. The cosmos have grown far taller than I'd anticipated, so they're covering up the dahlias behind them. So I won't make that mistake again next year. After a few days, no matter whether you did the pollinating yourself or you left it to the bees, you end up with a head that looks like this. Now it's up to you. You can leave it to its own devices, or you can give it a hand to develop seeds by making sure that all moisture gets squeezed out of it every day for a few days. For the last 3 days I've been doing just that. Eventually, after a couple of weeks or so, the seed head goes a golden brown colour. Now again, you can leave it to its own devices, but I like to take the heads off at that stage and put them in the vase in the greenhouse. I'll be showing you that in our October episode. It's the 8th of September. We've had a long dry spell, and now we're going through a very hot spell where temperatures have reached 28 degrees for 4 days on the run. Although I've been trying to do a bit of watering, it's not made a lot of difference for some of the dahlias that are really suffering in the heat. In these circumstances, there's only one thing that you can do, which is to remove all the dying flowers. Even if it rains tomorrow, which is forecast, flowers that have got into this sort of condition are not going to recover with a bit of rain. Now, I'm not going to drone on about how I deadhead my dahlias. I've already put a YouTube video out there called How Geoff and Heather Deadhead Their Dahlias. All I would say is that you need to cut down to the lowest possible point on the plant to take away the bloom in any stalk that's got no further flowers coming. This one has got another bloom coming, another bud, so I would only cut it at that point, like so. Whereas dead blooms like this one, which have had several flowers on the same stem, should be cut off right down at the base of the stem. There. The same with this one. Cut it off down there, because ultimately nothing else is going to grow from that stem, and taking it away is going to increase the air circulation. As you might have spotted, I've already got some Dahlias smut around on this plant, so a bit more air around there wouldn't hurt at all. And also you might get some more stems growing with some more flowers. So that's 2 more for the compost heap, which at the moment is pretty full. In order to dead edge your dahlias, as well as knowing whereabouts on the plant to cut the dahlias flowers off, you also need to know how to throw the dahlias into the wheelbarrow. Being able to throw them straight into the pot without having to pick them up off the floor saves a lot of energy. Over the years I've found that the best technique is to toss them into the air so that they drop out the sky directly into the wheelbarrow. You might have spotted that I've learned how to toss them into the air with both my left hand and my right hand. I think that people are very impressed by that skill. In fact, on our open weekend I overheard one of the visitors telling a friend that I was the complete top.
Now then, we don't want any of that kind of language in our videos. Anyway, that's the end of Geoff's epistle, and that's the end of the September episode. I've just overheard Geoff admitting that some of his dahlias are suffering from Dahlia smut disease. You might remember me telling you how Geoff said he was going to spray his plant with a fungicide to prevent smut. Well, he never got round to it. So we better get his sprayer out. Finally, I want to mention an article that appeared in The Independent a few days ago. A lovely journalist, Tom Peck, wrote how he's developed a love for growing dahlias, and he mentions Geoff as being one of his dahlia heroes. It's a lovely article, apart from the fact that he didn't mention me, Geoff's long-suffering and devoted wife. Ah, well. We've put a link to Tom's article in the comments field under this video. Bye for now.